Joining us now, NPR's TV critic Eric Deggans. So good to see you again, Eric. Thank you for joining us.
Always good to be seen.
Hey, I hear you. And here we are, brand new television season for the fall. Emmy Awards, all with the backdrop of a pandemic. And this is very, very different indeed. We'll get to the new season second. Let's talk about the Emmy Awards. As we go to tape here, we're already in the Creative Arts Emmys, which is kind of expanded this year. Explain a little of what happens with the Creative Arts.
Yeah, well, basically they give out a lot more awards than they can show on the primetime broadcast. And so a long time ago, they split out. They had different ceremonies for what they call the Creative Arts Emmys, which is a nice way of saying mostly categories that people in the industry care about, but that average viewers probably don't care that much about. So, a lot of the technical categories tend to be in this group, but also you have, guest acting awards are in there. A lot unscripted stuff is in there. Documentary is in there. So there's some categories that people care about, but for the most part, it's stuff that is of lower interest. And what they used to do until this year is they would have a ceremony that was about 8 days before the regular Emmys. It would be a week ago Saturday, before the Emmys, and it almost set the stage in a way because you could get a sense for what shows were popular with Academy voters. If you saw shows kind of racking up technical awards, if a show like Ozark or Watchmen is doing well in the technical categories, that might give you a sense that maybe people in Academy just like the show a lot, and make you think the show might do well in the major categories that we'd see during the Emmy broadcast in prime time. I don't know if that's going to be the case so much now, but what they decided to do this year was have a ceremony, have different groups of categories announced every night from Monday to Thursday, I think.
Right. And then
it's on. It's also on YouTube. You can watch it there. And so you never know. I mean, more people might get to see it. They're stringing out the announcement, so
right.
There's a little drip of news every day, which might be good for them. Kind of keep the Emmy Awards in people's consciousness.
And it culminates
it's an interesting thing to try and do rather than try to do the whole thing on a weekend. It's an interesting experiment.
And it culminates with an FXX special, so they actually are putting it on regular television.
Yeah, they'll put it on regular TV at some point, but again, I can't imagine.
It is what it is, as they say. Now, that leads us to the Primetime Emmys, which is going to be different. It's a virtual Primetime Emmys. Let's take the red carpet first, because I've done so many. You've been out there. This is going to be different. Can you imagine being out there? You can't. It's just person next to person, it wasn't going to happen. So do you think they'll do some type of play on the red carpet when they get to the awards?
Well, I mean, they've sent remote cameras to a ton of different locations to try and capture the people who were nominated. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to do something where, they saw how, it could be kind of fun to see, how are people spending Emmy night if they can't, go to a central location and have a big party there. Maybe people are having parties in their homes. Maybe people are getting dressed up in funny and funky ways. These are artists, and these are people who have a PhD in getting attention. So I wouldn't be surprised if they come up with some interesting looks for people. And of course, like a major pastime these days has been watching stars give these sort of Zoom type interviews like we're doing, and then looking behind them to see, like, what does their house look like? What does their family room look like? What pictures do they have on the walls? Do they have their Emmys that they've already won, somewhere behind them so you can see them? So this will kick into kind of overdrive here. I've heard there's something like 140 different camera setups that are going to be
Right.
utilized to create this broadcast. So one thing that has been interesting is to see Hollywood's creativity sort of brought to bear, and see people kind of forced to come up with new ways to tell stories and new ways to present things like an Emmy Award. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're going to do. Now they're going to have a press conference the day after we tape this, where they're going to talk a little bit about how they're going to do everything. So I'll know much more in a day or so.
And they will be in the virtual press room and the whole 9 yards. But you make an interesting point, and it is the crux of this. If you're nominated for an Emmy and I'm nominated for an Emmy, and you're down in Florida right now, and I'm here in Los Angeles, somebody comes and gives you, or they get a kit to you somehow, some way, and you have a camera which would go live, so they can be spontaneous here, to be clear, correct? So if the winner is you, and the Emmy goes to, oh my gosh, correct?
Right.
So there is some sense of surprise.
Well, yeah, there would be some sense of surprise, and again, we're talking about performers and artists. So I have a feeling, they have full control of their personal space.
Right.
And so I would not be surprised if some people come up with some really innovative ways to deliver acceptance speeches if they win. So I'm looking forward. I'm hoping that people will kind of bring their creativity to it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with. So
Jimmy Kimmel is host, executive producer. He gets to be as creative as he wants to be and can be within the confines and constraints of what you can do in a Zoom type of a situation. He will be at the Microsoft Theater, where the Emmys have always come off. Right. It ought to be interesting in and of itself. It'll be, I'm sure, safely distanced from all of his crew and staff.
He's been, he had been doing his late night show from his home for a while. So I think he's used to kind of being funny in a situation where there's no audience. And once he does the Emmys, then he's going to start doing Jimmy Kimmel Live from the studio where he normally does it. And most of the late night hosts now have gone back to the studios that they've done their shows from, just without an audience, and they've socially distanced the crew.
And they're still doing
it seems to be working so far.
And they're still doing, and the interviews mostly are still doing Zoom interviews. What we're doing.
Yeah, well, James Corden did one in person. The first one since the lockdown, as far as I know. Was it with Usher, I think? But he's done one in-person interview. So I imagine that's something that people will be kind of dipping their toe into, bringing back the in-person interview and seeing how that goes.
Okay, so now let us talk just about the top contenders and what the feel is by you. Who's going to win?
Let me grab my notes. Actually have
notes. I got my notes.
This is not the first conversation I've had about this.
This is what they call it's a cottage industry for us, correct?
Well, I mean, everybody wants to talk about it, and the TV Academy now has these nice little grids that they're willing to let you download and print out, and so it's so much easier to keep track of who was nominated and how many nominations, and they even have a few things that list
exactly
what people have won before and who's nominated for the first time. So there's even a little bit of trivia in there if you're willing to read through it.
We can have fun with this, and people they need to have fun with this. So let's talk about speaking of which, let's talk about the comedy series first, and start with lead actress in a comedy series. And we've got, what do we got? 7, 8?
Lead actress in a comedy, we've got Christina Applegate from Dead to Me, Rachel Brosnahan from Maisel, Linda Cardellini from Dead to Me, Catherine O'Hara from Schitt's Creek, Issa Rae from Insecure, and Tracy Ellis Ross from Blackish. And my sense is probably, what I've been telling people is, one thing that I do is I always look at how many total nominations the show got, because it gives you a sense of how many people in the TV Academy like that show.
Hmm.
So Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is the most nominated comedy. It got 20 nominations. And, we've seen people from that show do well in the past, Rachel Brosnahan, Tony Shalhoub, Alex Borstein, they've all won, and the show itself has won in the past. So the Emmy Academy loves Maisel, and that's one thing you got to keep in mind. Now, I do think that Catherine O'Hara from Schitt's Creek is the likely winner, because Schitt's Creek is this show that kind of came out of nowhere. It developed a substantial fan base in its last couple of seasons. Its final season just aired this year. There's a lot of love for Catherine O'Hara because she's been around a long time and people like her, and she's consistently done great work. And so an Emmy in this category might be considered like a career achievement Emmy, because who knows when she'll be able to be in a position to win something like this again. And I think, in the industry, there's a lot of love for the Schitt's Creek story. This Canadian TV show started out, the first season was kind of uneven, and then they really pulled it together and created something that was Emmy worthy. That was really quite a good, touching comedy. So I think she's a strong contender. I think she's likely to win. She's the one I most would like to win. But I would never count out Maisel. I would never count out Maisel.
Do not underestimate Maisel, and Brosnahan could walk away the winner with this. But I would we're in agreement so far. And yes, the show is the little engine that could. It really came from it ain't going to happen. And it was kind of a cult show at first. And then. Yeah.
And it's surprising that they ended it. Like they kind of announced the decision to end it like right when the popularity of the show was really starting to build, and I really thought they were going to just say, oh, we're kidding, find some excuse, but they stuck to it. So
that's our lead actress, very close between O'Hara and Brosnahan, and your pick is going to be O'Hara. We move to lead actor in a comedy series. Lead actor, you go ahead.
Yeah, so what? Anthony Anderson from Blackish, Don Cheadle from Black Monday, Ted Danson from The Good Place, Michael Douglas from Kaminsky Method, Eugene Levy from Schitt's Creek, and Rami Youssef from Rami. And again, I'm going to pick Eugene Levy for much the same reasons, from Schitt's Creek, for much the same reasons that I picked Catherine O'Hara. People love the show for all the reasons that I listed. And Eugene Levy is another guy who's done consistently great work for a very long time, and he's someone who seems to have a great reputation in the industry. People seem to like him, and so I think there's probably a lot of love for him out in the Academy. And again, when will the Emmy Academy have a chance to give him an Emmy in a leading role again? That might not happen. So I think it's even more likely that Eugene Levy's going to win.
Give me your perspective on this. Perspective on two, I think, possibilities. Ted Danson for The Good Place. It's a great show, a following, a very loyal following. Possible, in your estimation?
The thing I would say about The Good Place, and I'm trying to see where it falls on the list of, it's not on the list of most nominated shows, I don't think. And Ted Danson has been nominated in this category before and not won. Which indicates to me that the Emmy Academy likes him enough to nominate him, but doesn't love him enough to actually give him the award. And that's why I think he might not win. I mean, again, this is another situation where he's a famously nice guy. There's the show was great, I felt, but I don't think The Good Place. Like, people who love The Good Place really love it, but I don't think The Good Place generated the same sort of general consensus in the industry that it was a great show, even though I thought it was a great show.
Great show.
And so, the question is, how much does the Academy love Schitt's Creek versus how much does the Academy love The Good Place? And I think The Good Place was always sort of considered kind of an oddball, esoteric, eccentric kind of thing that everybody knows is good, but didn't really inspire a lot of passion in the Emmy Academy. So I don't think Ted Danson's going to win.
And let me throw a curveball in there to get your reaction. Michael Douglas from the Kaminsky Method.
That's very possible. the thing about Kaminsky is you have people really seen it. Have enough people really seen it to want to honor him. And it's weird too, because I think sometimes stardom works against people who get nominated, because the actors who are voting in these acting categories are want to show that they're not impressed,
Mm-hmm.
just because somebody's a big star. And that's the reason why I don't think Meryl Streep is going to win in her category either, or Jennifer Aniston in her category.
Oh, we'll get to.
So,
that's interesting.
so I mean, it's entire. I mean, what I will say, and what I should have said at the beginning of this, is that I'm historically bad at these predictions. I've gotten better in recent years, but there's been plenty of years when I've been wrong about a lot. So I could easily be wrong about this. But my hunch, I'm always trying to figure out. I mean, it's weird for me because I live in Florida, so I'm not really hanging out with the people who are actually voting on the Emmys.
And I did pretty good on this. Decent, not great, but decent on this. So this is
I think it's easier for people who are in LA like you. So you can go to screenings, and you can do it now. But in years past, you could go to screenings, you could go to events, you could talk to people, and you could get a sense of what people's sentiments were. That's another reason why I think this Emmy Awards is kind of up for grabs, is because there's not as much of a capacity for groupthink, because people aren't hanging out they're not going to workspaces, they're not going to screenings, they're not going to panel discussions, they're not going to receptions, and so they're not hanging out and sort of talking to each other and talking each other into positions. I think we're getting much more what the voters actually think about these shows. I think Michael Douglas is great. I don't know that he's done the level of work that a Ted Danson or a Eugene Levy has done
fair enough.
in their
I want to
parts,
throw
to
that
be
in there
honest.
as a curveball.
I do think that Rami Youssef is pretty awesome. I don't know if enough people have seen Rami, and I also don't know like this second season. I don't know if you watched it, but this second season, his character was a little more passive and a little more annoying, and I think maybe that might have messed with his chances in winning in this category. But to me, he'd be a really interesting winner, and the person I would next most advocate to win the category.
I would agree.
But I think Eugene Levy's going to win it.
Okay. Outstanding comedy series, Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Curb Your Enthusiasm. Let's see. Where's Curb?
Dead.
See, I don't know. I have no idea if this metric is actually.
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
I have no idea if this metric is actually going to work, but it doesn't have a lot of nominations either. And my sense with Curb has always been that again, it's one of those shows where it gets nominated, but people don't like, but the Emmy Academy doesn't like it. So Curb Your Enthusiasm, Dead to Me, The Good Place, Insecure, The Kaminsky Method, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Schitt's Creek, What We Do in the Shadows. Those are all the nominees.
You're gonna go.
So again, if you follow my reasoning, and who knows, Emmy Academy can do what it wants, but Maisel has the most nominations with 20, and then the next most with nominations, I think, is Schitt's Creek. The next most is Schitt's Creek, which has 15. And then the next comedy with most nominations is pretty far down. It's Insecure, which has 8. So I think again, I'm thinking Schitt's Creek is going to have an evening. It's as far as Emmy is concerned, it's a fresh show. And again, it's ended, so this is the only chance that Emmy would have to actually honor it. And Maisel has already won this category. So I'm hoping Schitt's Creek wins, and I'm thinking Schitt's Creek will probably win. But if Schitt's Creek doesn't win, then The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is definitely.
And I'm thinking the other way. It's funny. We agree on both of them. I think Maisel will pull it out again because of the year we've had. It's got the music and the thing. It's fun to watch. So Schitt's Creek, no question about it. but it has again, it's a very, it could go either way. I would tend right now to say Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. You would say Schitt's Creek. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and the only reason I would say that too is it feels like the Emmy Awards are trying hard to get out of that rut that they were in for many years, where they kept giving the same awards to the same people.
That's a good idea.
And you know, they're you know, there's a lot of returning shows in these nominees, but I think they've also tried very hard to recognize new voices. You know, you know, seeing nominations for Schitt's Creek or What We Do in the Shadows. Insecure got its first, you know, Best Comedy nomination. They really seem to be trying to reach out to new shows and shows that haven't been nominated for Emmys before. So that's what makes me think like it's like Maisel has won so many Emmys that you know, they might want to change things up and honor a show that hasn't won as many and that won't be eligible in the future.
Okay, now we move to drama. And let's start off again with lead actress for a drama series. And some really good contenders here.
Yeah, Jennifer Aniston for The Morning Show, Olivia Colman for The Crown, Jodie Comer for Killing Eve, Laura Linney for Ozark, Sandra Oh for Killing Eve, and Zendaya for Euphoria. This is a tough category. Everybody did an amazing job in their roles. Again, I do think that you know, Aniston did some career-defining work. You know, she did a great job in a TV show that I think was uneven, and wasn't necessarily as good as it should have been. But she was really good in it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you know, I always have this sense, and I may be wrong, but I always have this sense that Emmy is not all that enamored of big stars, of honoring big stars beyond nominating them. You know, so I you know, I don't know. I mean, she's well liked. She could win, but my money really is on Olivia Colman or Laura Linney. These are two actresses who have strong track records with Emmy. The Emmy Academy clearly likes them, and they've done great work. And their shows have a lot of nominations. Ozark is the third most nominated show, tied with Succession.
Great show.
And Crown is not too far behind with 13 total nominations.
So you would pick one over Coleman, or if you had to pick one?
I think, I mean, this is where sort of my feelings as a critic kind of make it hard for me to judge. I think Olivia Colman has done the better job of the two of them. So I would think she would win. But you know, Emmy voters like Laura Linney a lot, and Emmy voters seem to have really indicated a real love for Ozark, which I was surprised by, because it seemed like a show that gets overlooked when people talk about quality television. But Emmy really stepped up this year and gave them a lot of nominations. So. My money's still on Olivia Colman, but I think it's a coin flip between her.
I'm going to take the bet on this that you're not, and I'm going to go with Jennifer Aniston. For the simple reason she put in an exquisite performance, but more than that, she showed a side. You know, obviously Friends, that's her brand, and then the romantic comedies that she's done. You know, always good work. This was a different side of her. And I think because it's so different and showed another side of her acting, I think it goes to her. We'll see. This is good. I'm glad you're – but and Linney would be my second, but this will be – and you're going with Coleman. So this is what it's all about. It really is. Because,
yeah, it's weird. And you know, Olivia Colman won the Golden Globe.
Yeah, that's correct. And
she beat Aniston, and she beat Aniston.
She beat Aniston. I'm telling you, this is going to be very interesting. Now let's move over to the lead actor. Lead actor for a drama series and the nominees.
Yeah, so Jason Bateman for Ozark, Sterling K. Brown from This Is Us, Steve Carell from The Morning Show, Brian Cox from Succession, Billy Porter from Pose, and Jeremy Strong from Succession.
We're going to agree on this one. We're going to agree on this one. Go ahead.
We are? Okay, yeah. I think this is a Succession a Succession category, and
Slam
Jeremy
dunk.
Strong should win it, I think. But I do think it's possible that Brian Cox might win
One of the
because
two.
because he's a bigger star.
I think Brian will probably. It's going to be. We agree. See the two of those, but I think Brian will win. He won the Globe, if I'm correct.
Yeah, and he's a bigger star. But the thing about the Golden Globes is that the Golden Globes are, I think, biased towards international performers. They like Brits and Europeans, and so when you have a category like that where a bunch of people are nominated, I always expect that the Brit might have an edge. So Brian Cox won in that category in the Globes, and Olivia Colman won in that category in the Globes as well.
So here you're thinking Jeremy Strong.
Well, I think Jeremy Strong should win it because I think he had the tougher acting job because he was playing a character who was kind of lost in the second season and was it seemed to be almost like a beaten dog, like his spirit had been broken. And then his father he tried to win his father's affections by doing what he thought his father wanted from him, and then his father kept humiliating him, and then he decided at the end of the season he wouldn't take it anymore. And so I think he had the more complex journey as a character, whereas Brian Cox was chewing the scenery, playing a ruthless media mogul who has a family that he does not know how to love. Right. And so but it's a more straightforward kind of
but it could go either way. We won't be surprised if either one of the two win.
No, I would not be surprised, and I think you're entirely right. Brian might actually win just because he's a bigger star.
Which brings us to the outstanding drama series, and the nominees are
Better Call Saul, The Crown, The Handmaid's Tale, Killing Eve, The Mandalorian, Ozark, Stranger Things, and Succession. I think Succession's going to win this.
We're hands down on this. I think Succession is going to.
Yeah, it's well, again, I'm going back to my formula, which is Succession and Ozark are tied for the most nominations overall. Right. They each have 18, but I think Succession is a story that feels a little more of the moment. It's about a family that owns a very powerful media corporation like the Murdochs, who own Fox News, and it's about their inability to, how the family dynamic of love and compassion and affection that you would normally expect between a father and his children has been completely atomized by the fact that they run this huge corporation, and their father is a relentless narcissist who puts nothing above the health and well-being of the corporation that he controls. And so you have all these people who are supremely dysfunctional. They don't know how to love each other. They don't know how to receive love or give love. And they're completely in need of it anyway. And they're bouncing off of each other while they're trying to run this huge corporation that is facing an existential crisis of its own. And I thought that was a supremely, like this, the first season was good, but the show didn't quite know, the show hadn't quite found its tone yet. And in the second season, it really found its tone.
I agree.
I thought it was masterful. And so it feels more of the moment than Ozark does, which is a really well done crime drama, really complex, but not quite hitting the button of what we're going through.
Is Jason Bateman, just a side on this, is Jason Bateman up for a director?
For director? That's a good question.
Because if he is, I don't have it in front of me, but I tell you, you hit the word complex. Ozark is really a well done, well crafted, well acted, and well directed show. I believe. And
I have been saying the whole time the show's been on, I've been saying that people have been sleeping on it, that it's a really good show that does not get its due. And when it first came out, people said, "Oh, it's Breaking Bad, but it's a family." And I just thought that was a really reductive and simplistic way to look at it.
Yeah.
And the second season was interesting, but not quite as powerful as the first. And then the third season, they really clicked in. They really found their tone. They really figured out how it's a delicate dance that the show does, because it's about a family that is constantly on the verge of being killed by several different people in this criminal world that they operate in, and being able to make that seem authentic, like that their fears about being killed are justified, and keep it from being this cartoon where they're constantly threatened but they somehow get out of it. They really walk that tightrope very well.
We agree on that, but we agree Succession's going to win. So it'll be on ABC. Kimmel will host, Kimmel will executive produce, and then, as tradition has it, the kickoff of the new television season. And just in a couple of moments, because we'll do this as the season goes on. We talked about this last time. There ain't a whole lot in the pipeline, is there? So what can we expect? What are your highlights as we move into the new season?
Well, there's still a lot of new shows on streaming, and a few new shows on cable. But the broadcasters, their pilot season was decimated by the pandemic. So, the new scripted shows that we're seeing on broadcast were shows that either got pulled from another platform, like CBS is going to air LA's Finest, which is a show they got from Spectrum. It's an original that Spectrum was airing. They're going to air the first season of Star Trek Discovery, which was on CBS All Access, a streaming service. They're pulling material from all these different places. NBC put on a Canadian show, Canadian medical drama called Transplant. And AMC even brought over a couple of shows from Britain that were very successful. But those shows were not cast-offs. Those shows were very popular in Britain, and they're very well done. One called Gangs of London, a crime drama. Another one called the Salisbury Poisonings, about what do you call it? They dramatized a 4-part limited series about when a small town in London was exposed to a nerve agent because Russian foot soldiers tried to poison and kill an enemy of Putin's who was living in Britain, and the health officials had to figure out what happened and try to keep other people from getting sick. It's given that it's airing in a pandemic. It really parallels some of the things that we've all been going through, but of course that nerve agent is much more deadly. So sometimes people are getting good shows like with AMC, but for the most part they're getting sort of an ad hoc kind of cobbled together fall TV season that has a lot of unscripted in it, has a lot of game shows in it, and has shows that are pulled from all these weird platforms. So, but I am looking forward to a few things. I'm looking forward to the Salisbury Poisonings on AMC. That's a really good show, and people should watch it. And I think it will resonate a lot with people who are going through a pandemic. Let's see what else. The Comey rule is a 4-hour. It's still over 2 nights, 4 hours. It's a drama that's based on Jim Comey's book, and it basically follows Jim Comey from when he had to start investigating Hillary Clinton's emails to when he gets fired by Trump for not declining to profess his loyalty to Trump, and for starting to investigate allegations that the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians. And what's interesting about this is that even though it's based on Jim Comey's book, it doesn't make Jim Comey look that good. It really makes the case that he completely fumbled the public, I don't want to say public relations aspect of it, but the public aspect of disclosing what he was doing when he was when he was investigating Hillary Clinton. And it completely makes the case that because he was too self-righteous, he was too transparent about what they were doing, and he severely damaged Hillary Clinton's campaign because of it. But it also makes the point that a lot of the people around Trump were too close to the Russians, and a lot of intelligence officials were afraid that several of those people were severely compromised, including Trump himself. And they couldn't understand why the Trump administration didn't take it more seriously. That the Russians were trying to influence the 2016 election, and that they seemed to have compromising information on people like Michael Flynn. So I think it's not like the world's best dramatization, in part because a lot of the people that they cast don't look or sound very much like the people they're supposed to be playing. The guy they cast to play Obama looks like he's about 12 years old. And Brendan Gleeson is great, but when you're playing a president that's something of a cartoon, any dramatization is going to look like that. So he doesn't, you wouldn't want to hire somebody who's just an impressionist, but he doesn't, to me, look or sound enough like Trump that you can sort of lose yourself in what he's doing. And so you're constantly reminded that this is an actor playing Trump. And Jeff Daniels plays Comey, and he doesn't really look anything like him. So it is, it has a lot of flaws, but it's a really interesting piece.
And one more thing on the political note, West Wing. The West Wing is going to return.
Yeah, West Wing cast is going to.
What?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just for the hell of it, I had started rewatching old West Wing episodes. Mm-hmm. Because that show was a liberal fantasy of how a White House would operate. And what is interesting is to go back and watch old TV shows and see how much male-centeredness there is, see how much white male-centeredness there is. And what struck me about the West Wing is that it was very much a white male-centered show. It made no bones about it, and it would do things like it was very self-conscious about how it treated women and people of color on the show, and it would have the characters acknowledged. Like I watched the episodes where they decided to hire Dule Hill's character. Dule Hill played a young black man whose mother was a police officer and had been killed, and he winds up working as the president's valet. And they have this discussion about the optics of having a black kid carrying around the president's coat and hat and things like that. But they decide to hire him anyway as a valet. Yeah. And I'm just thinking to myself, why don't you hire him to do something other than carry the president's coat? But they didn't think about that. What they did was they had a conversation to try and sort of inoculate themselves from charges that they weren't considering what they were doing, and then they went on ahead and did it anyway. And they would do that with the female characters too. They would have them, discuss sexism, and then they would go ahead and treat them and treat the characters in sexist ways. So when I heard that the West Wing cast was reuniting to read a script, I thought, well, that's nice, but that show was really problematic when you go back and watch it.
So what will happen here? This will be a table read, or is this going to be?
Yeah, it's a table read.
Yeah. And literally in a primetime hour they'll do a table read, or how is this going to work?
I'm not quite sure. There've been other table reads done via video chat.
Right.
So I imagine
we'll see what
I imagine it'll be like that. And the of course the other thing that's really interesting is that it's bringing up all the old stories about how Rob Lowe wanted to be treated like a star and caused a lot of turmoil on the set, and wound up creating a situation where Aaron Sorkin had to leave the show. Right. And there was a lot of the other actors were kind of upset with him for that, and then he wound up leaving the show not long after Sorkin left. So it's bringing up all these old stories again, which is also kind of an interesting sort of side note.
And finally, people say to me, well, what about Blue Bloods and the FBI and all of the shows that people just out of the blue say, is that back? Are they coming back? And billions, so on and so forth. What are we going to hear about this?
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing is that the studios are very tentatively and very carefully sort of getting back into production. So, for example, Fargo has, a fourth season that's going to start in late September. And they when the lockdowns happened, they had 2 episodes that they hadn't filmed yet. And so apparently FX kind of quietly resumed production and just finished filming those 2 episodes.
Got it.
And This Is Us is going to come back in November with 2 episodes that talk directly about the coronavirus pandemic and Black Lives Matter. And they're supposed to go into production in the last week of September. So, it seems like every show is kind of figuring out how they're going to slowly come back. Production has ramped up, I think, a little quicker or sooner in Canada and in Europe and Britain especially. So slowly, the industry is starting to get back into making new episodes of television with new safety protocols. I'm hearing, a lot of places are hiring for their sets COVID officers, people whose job it is to keep an eye on all of the health and safety measures that are in place.
COVID compliance officers.
Yeah. And so, it seems like the industry is just slowly kind of coming back. And I imagine at some point, some production will have a problem with infections, and that will slow the thing
down. What I'm gathering is things are trickling in, and as they do, we'll come back and resume this and then take a look at what goes on, because Lord knows this is the most unorthodox television season in our lifetimes, and it's going to be interesting, and that includes syndication, which we'll get into in news and all that stuff. As always, it is a pleasure. We'll compare notes on the winners as the Emmy season and the Emmy Awards roll on. The new television season approaches.
I'm sure you will be sending an email saying "I told you so" for several categories, because, like I said, I have these hunches, but who knows if they're actually.
That's what this is all about. I always say this is another version of sports, and people kind of want it. They want to root for their shows, and then. We'll see what happens, but we will talk again. We will hear you on NPR. TV critic for NPR. NPR is Eric Deggans. Thank you for joining us as always.
Thank you.